The storm had been gathering since dawn, a restless sky painted in shades of iron and ash, and the city below seemed to sense something ominous in the air. Sarah had woken up with contractions that morning, faint at first, like whispers against her body, but they had grown louder, more insistent as the day carried on. She told herself she had time, that she and Daniel would reach the hospital before the baby came. But fate, in its cruel and unpredictable way, had other plans. They were already running late. The traffic had snarled in the city center, lights blinking red through sheets of rain, and Sarah had insisted they take the subway instead. Faster, she thought, cleaner than weaving through endless streets with horns blaring and cars stalled. Daniel had hesitated, but when Sarah clutched her belly with a gasp, her face paling, he knew there was no arguing. They hurried down the wet stone steps into the belly of the station, the air heavy with the scent of metal and damp clothing, the sound of distant rails echoing like a pulse through the tunnels. By the time they boarded the crowded elevator that led to the underground platform, Sarah's contractions were no longer whispers. They were thunder. Each wave gripped her body with a force she could not deny, bending her forward, pressing the air from her lungs. Daniel tried to remain calm, squeezing her hand, whispering reassurances that felt hollow against the panic rising inside him. The elevator was small, packed with strangers, and the fluorescent lights flickered above them as the doors sealed shut with a metallic clang. Halfway down, with a groan from somewhere deep in the machine's bones, the elevator shuddered to a stop. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the anxious murmurs of the passengers. Someone pressed the emergency button. A harsh buzz filled the chamber, followed by a crackling voice that promised help was on the way. But Sarah barely heard it. She doubled over, clutching at Daniel's arm, a cry tearing from her throat. Her water had broken. The baby was coming now. Panic rippled through the small crowd, but one voice rose above the rest, steady, commanding, and impossibly familiar. "Move aside. Give her space. She needs to lie down." Sarah froze. The voice cut through years of memory like a blade. She lifted her head, sweat dripping into her eyes, and saw him. At first she thought it must be a hallucination brought on by the pain. But no, it was real. Standing just a few feet away, pressed against the opposite wall of the elevator, was Michael. Michael, the man she had not seen in nearly a decade. The man who had once held her heart so tightly and then shattered it with a choice that had seemed unforgivable. She had never expected to see him again, not in this life, not in this way. And yet here he was, older now, his hair flecked with gray, his eyes still carrying that piercing intensity that once made her feel as though she had nowhere to hide. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The noise of the elevator, the anxious chatter of the passengers, the pounding in her ears, all of it fell away. She could not breathe. She could not understand how he was here, of all places at this exact moment. "Sarah," Michael said, his voice softer now, though the authority in it remained. "You need to lie down. The baby is coming. I can help." Her lips trembled, words fighting to escape, but another contraction silenced her. She collapsed against Daniel, her body shaking. Daniel looked at Michael with suspicion, his protective instincts flaring, but Michael's expression was unshakable, calm, certain, professional. It was then that Daniel noticed the stethoscope poking out from Michael's bag, the medical insignia on the badge clipped to his jacket. Michael was a doctor now. The irony was unbearable. The man Sarah had once loved, the man she had sworn never to see again, was now the only person in this impossible place who could deliver her child. The passengers shuffled awkwardly, forming a circle as best they could in the cramped space. Someone laid down their jacket on the floor for Sarah to rest on. Michael knelt beside her, his hand steady, his voice low and reassuring. "You're safe," he said, looking into her eyes with a focus that made the rest of the world disappear. "I know this is the last place you wanted to be, But you can do this. I'm here." Sarah wanted to scream at him, to demand why fate had brought him back into her life now, when she was vulnerable and broken open. But the contractions left no room for words. All she could do was cling to Daniel's hand and stare into the face of the man who had once been her everything. The elevator groaned again, lights flickering as though the whole world balanced on the edge of collapse. Outside, rain hammered against the city. But down here, in this suspended box of metal and fear, life itself hung in the balance. Minutes stretched into eternities. Michael coached her through each contraction, his voice unwavering, his hands guiding with practiced precision. He was both a stranger and someone achingly familiar. And with every push, every cry, Sarah felt not only her child coming into the world, but also the weight of memories she had long buried breaking free. She remembered the nights when she and Michael had dreamed of a future together, the whispered promises, the plans that dissolved when he left for another country, another life. She remembered the letter he never answered, the way her heart hardened into silence. She had convinced herself she hated him, but as he knelt before her now, saving her, she felt something shift. Hate was too simple a word for what she carried. The baby's head crowned. The passengers leaned forward, wide-eyed, caught between horror and awe. Sarah screamed, her body trembling with effort, and Michael urged her on. "One more push! You're almost there! You've got this!" And then, with a final cry that tore through her like fire, the baby came into the world. A tiny, wailing miracle in Michael's hands. For a long moment, no one moved. The sound of the baby's cry filled the elevator, raw and perfect, echoing off the metal walls. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she reached out, her arms trembling, and Michael placed the child into her embrace. She looked down at the baby, the world blurring around her. She had done it. Against all odds, in a place no one could have imagined, her child was here, alive, beautiful. And standing above her, watching with an unreadable expression, was the man she had once thought lost to her forever.